All right, let's dive in. We're about to tackle one of the most mysterious, most debated, and honestly, most fascinating books ever written, the Book of Revelation. For centuries, it's been a source of endless confusion and controversy. But our goal today, we're going to cut through all of that and demystify this famously complex text.
So let me ask you a question. When you hear that word apocalypse, what's the very first thing that pops into your head? For most of us, right, it's probably something straight out of a Hollywood blockbuster. Meteors crashing down, zombies, total global chaos, basically the end of everything. But is that what this book is really about?
Well, let's get right to the heart of it, because this is a game changer. The word apocalypse actually comes from the Greek word apocalypsis. And you know what it means? It doesn't mean catastrophe or end of the world. It means an unveiling, a disclosure. So the point of the book isn't to hide the future in some impossible to crack code. It's to reveal something absolutely crucial.
Now, to really get this unveiling, we need a little bit of context. The source material tells us this was written by the Apostle John, way back around 95 AD. And get this, he wasn't sitting in some comfortable study. He was in exile, a prisoner, on the rugged, harsh Roman penal colony of Patmos. He was there for his faith, and that setting, that feeling of persecution, that's a huge piece of the puzzle for understanding the message. Now, you might think the book just jumps around from one crazy vision to the next, but it's not chaotic at all. In fact, it actually gives us its own blueprint. It has this clear, divinely inspired structure that kind of lays everything out for us. And here it is, a super simple three-part framework. First, John is told to write down what you have seen, and that's the powerful initial vision he has of Jesus Christ. Second, he's to write what is, which is all about the current situation in 7 real-life churches. And third, write what will take place. And that's all the future events that make up most of the book. And this is the brilliant part. This structure isn't something we just made up later. It's a direct command from the text itself. This one verse, Revelation 1:19, is literally the key that unlocks the organization of the entire book. It's awesome. Okay, so let's zoom in on that second part and see how this builds out, the things which are. What we're talking about here are 7 actual letters sent to 7 real, historical churches in what we now call modern-day Turkey. And what's so fascinating is just how timeless these problems are. I mean, look at this. There are warnings against losing your original passion, being afraid of what others think, compromising on your values, or just becoming spiritually numb and, lukewarm. For these communities that were under intense pressure from the outside, these internal weaknesses were just as dangerous as any threat from Rome. Just look at this contrast. It's incredible. On one hand, you've got the church in Ephesus. They were checking all the boxes. Doctrinally perfect, they hated evil, but they had lost that fire, their first love. Their work just wasn't a substitute for passion. And then you have the other extreme, Laodicea. They were rich, self-sufficient, they thought they had it all, but they were spiritually lukewarm. So bland, in fact, that Christ says he's about to spit them out of his mouth. Whoa. These letters were a serious wake-up call. All right, so with that foundation in place, we can move into the third part of the blueprint, what will take place. And this is where we run into some of Revelation's most iconic, most dramatic imagery, starting with, you guessed it, the 4 horsemen. Now, these guys aren't just random agents of chaos. According to the text, they're unleashed one by one, as a figure called the Lamb, who represents Jesus Christ, opens the first 4 of 7 seals on a divine scroll. Think of that scroll as like the title deed to the entire universe, and breaking each seal kicks off the next stage of God's final plan. So the first horseman comes out on a white horse, and it's easy to mistake him for a good guy. But look closely at the details. He's carrying a bow, but there are no arrows mentioned. The source material interprets this as a conqueror who brings a kind of false peace, a temporary one, through diplomacy and agreements, not through open war. It's a deceptive victory. And that false peace? Yeah, it gets shattered by the second horseman. He's on a fiery red horse, symbolizing bloodshed, and he's carrying this huge sword. He's given the power to just take peace from the earth, causing people to slaughter one another. So right after that deceptive peace, you get widespread violent war. Next up, the black horse. Its rider is holding a pair of balance scales, a symbol of commerce, but also of scarcity. And then a voice declares that a quart of wheat, which is basically 1 meal for 1 person, is going to cost a full day's wages. Can you imagine? This represents a catastrophic famine and total economic collapse right on the heels of the war. And finally, the fourth horseman appears on a pale green horse. It's this sickly, corpse-like color. And his name is just stated right out. It's Death. And Hades follows right behind him. He's given authority over a quarter of the entire earth to kill with the sword, with famine, with disease, and even with wild animals. The scale is just devastating.
So, okay, we've got horsemen, we've got lambs, dragons. It's really easy to get lost in all this imagery, right? But the thing is, the book isn't meant to be read like a literal newspaper headline. To really understand it, you kind of need the decoder ring for its symbolic language.
And here is the absolute crucial point. Revelation is speaking in symbols, and a lot of them would have been instantly recognizable to the first people who read it because they're pulled straight out of the Old Testament.
Let's take a big one, Babylon. Why would John use a code word? Well, think about it. For John and his readers, writing "down with the Roman Empire" would have been an immediate death sentence. Babylon was the perfect stand-in, an obvious code for the idolatrous, persecuting empire of their day. It allowed him to send this powerful message of hope and resistance without getting his audience arrested.
And what about maybe the most famous number in history, 666? Instead of some literal barcode on your forehead, the source interprets this number as a symbol. In Jewish numerology, 7 is the number of perfection. 6 falls short. So 666 is like ultimate imperfection, times 3. It's a symbol for any human system, or any person, that stands in vicious opposition to God and his people. Now, the central hero of the whole story is the Lamb. And this is such a powerful paradox. A symbol of meekness, of sacrifice, is also the only one worthy and powerful enough to kick off God's ultimate plan. For an audience that was feeling completely powerless, the message here was crystal clear. True victory doesn't come from brute force. It comes through sacrifice.
And of course, every hero needs a villain. The Great Red Dragon is the main antagonist in this story. It's a pretty clear representation of Satan and the overarching power of evil that is constantly opposing the Lamb all the way through the narrative.
And this symbolic language is incredibly consistent. For example, anytime you see the number 7, it represents fullness or completion. You see horns on a beast, that symbolizes power and authority. The New Jerusalem, that's not a city on a map. It's the capital of God's eternal kingdom. And those white garments you see people wearing, they always stand for victory, purity, and righteousness. See, there's a system to it. So when you put all these pieces together, the blueprint, the letters to the churches, the horsemen, the symbols, what's the main takeaway? What's the bottom line? Well, despite all of the terrifying imagery of judgment, the central theme of the book is actually one of profound hope. It's about the ultimate, decisive victory of Jesus Christ over all evil and the final establishment of his eternal kingdom. You know, at the end of the day, Revelation works on so many different levels. It's a letter of encouragement to persecuted Christians in the first century. It's a prophecy about what's to come. And it's a timeless story about the cosmic conflict between good and evil. So, knowing now that apocalypse really means unveiling, how does that change your perspective on what this incredible book is all about?